Welcome, everyone, to the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast, where experts from around the world talk shop, share stories, and offer their favorite tip. I'm your host, Christy Wilhelmi. We continue our series of interviews with speakers from the Heirloom Expo in Ventura County, California. My guest this week is Wendi Phan. Wendi is the founder of the Gardens of Wendiland. She has provided organically grown herbs and edible plants to homes and workspaces since 2010. She's got a popular YouTube channel, and her website offers unique plants and seeds for sale. Thanks for chatting with me, Wendi.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I can't remember when it was, but it wasn't in an heirloom. It was at an heirloom expo.
Yeah.
And what I remember about that is that somebody introduced us, and you were holding a unique tropical plant the whole time we were talking.
Probably.
Yeah. So were tropical plants where Wendiland got its beginning?
Uh, yeah, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it started from this one plant that I ate for most of my life growing up.
What was it?
It's called a longevity spinach.
Oh,
Yeah, so this plant my mom grew for as long as I could remember. She always that was almost the only veggie I ate a lot of because we grew back then in my space, I think that was only one of the 3 or 5 plants we had, and that was the most abundant.
mhm.
Just so easy to grow. Like most of the year, it's there, and it's just so easy to eat and versatile, and how you can cook and use it.
So is it a true spinach or
It's not a spinach at all, but
Okay.
a lot of things out there when they call a lot of tropical vegetables that has that texture,
Okay.
they call it that because just the similarity of how they taste. So it is a very neutral flavor. It's pretty easy to eat rather than it's a good introduction to leafy greens and healthier greens, I would say.
That makes sense. So, uh, where do you grow your plants and how much space do you have to work with? Because I've seen your videos and I want people to know what it is how you manage growing all of this stuff for sale.
Yeah, so I bet many of you guys that are listening have a way more larger garden than me, even a foot more. I'm jealous. I grow in about 6 by 50, so about roughly 300, 350, no more than that square feet.
Okay.
It's just a very narrow, boxed-in alleyway almost. It's a patio space.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think in one of your videos, I saw that you use vertical space to your advantage. Is that
Yeah.
the case? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I have to do that. That's pretty much the only way to grow and to pack more, because then if I'm growing vertically, it's not just like 6 by 50. It's now 6 by 50 by 8 by 10. I'm just increasing space. Vertically growing more food and more options if I'm growing in vertical systems that allows me to grow, say, 30 or 40 plants in 4 square space.
Yeah. And where are you located? What part of the country?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
Inland.
you're inland. So you get the hot summers
I do.
and cooler winters, but it's
Yeah.
mild. And you're growing year round.
I'm growing year round, and it's a bit of a more microclimate for me because of uh, it's more like a boxed-in area. I get a lot of shade. Only the upper part's probably about 4.5 to 5 feet, where it gets closer to the top of the walls,
Oh.
would get more sun.
Oh, so you have to strategize vertically
You have
too.
to, yeah, and how much the soil, the drainage, the issue with having better drainage as it gets lower to the ground, closer to the ground, and different types of plants, more shade-loving plants. So I'm really stacking and doing that whole classic, this thriller, filler, spiller kind of to arrange, get the most out of the space.
Right. Thrill, spill, fill
Yeah.
is a basic technique for designing mostly containers, right? You would
Yes.
say container plants. So
Yeah.
you have something that's tall and thrills
Yeah.
kind of visually, and then something that spills over the edge, and then a filler that goes in between there.
And the back for me filler is background vines,
Oh, yeah.
edible green vines.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. So you have an eclectic mix of non-edible and edible plants in your life.
Yeah.
From what I can tell. A lot of them I've never heard of. Did you discover them along the way, or were they always part of your life and culture?
When I was young, my grandfather did garden, and the very first plant he gave me was like a Christmas cacti, almost like a dragon fruit. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think I had a great introduction to gardening because he gave me a plant that almost bloomed. It was like with a bud. I was about,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
so it didn't disappoint.
That's nice. You didn't have to wait a year or so for it to show up. Yeah.
Exactly. And then after that, I sort of always been in, not like really into it, but just always gone to nurseries and bought plants. And eventually I started noticing the research that they talked about, like the longevity spinach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how it helps with like blood sugar and cholesterol. And then my dad, was diagnosed with that. And I was like, why don't you try this plant, And although, I actually never done testings on it, of course, but it seems that it was helping him. And that was a lot of it that he ate. And I was just really interested in longevity, especially for the health of my dog at that time.
Oh.
Yeah. So I started planting more medicinal herbs.
Were you feeding your dog longevity spinach or something?
Yes, she was having green smoothies and juices with me.
Oh wow, good.
Yeah, whenever I ate, she always ate like pretty much everything, like 90%, unless it's stuff that's actually not good for dogs. Otherwise, lots of fruits and vegetables. She would steal kale off my basket.
I have seen that. I've seen dogs eating peppers off the plant and peaches off the tree, and
the lower part is
low fruit.
Yeah.
Literally low hanging fruit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny. And I think just to clarify, your a lot of these plants, there's tropical, or would you say subtropical?
They're more subtropical. It's a little easier. It's tropical, very few. Yeah.
And what origins do most of these have? Or are they kind of all over the map?
All over, mostly focused in Southeast Asia. I grow a lot of those herbs because I am from Vietnam.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's a few, like the couple from Africa. Yeah. I think it was like Southern Africa or something. But most plants would be okay for our zone 10. For very cold times, I do bring them in certain plants, and especially we had like a previous year with the winter, very wet winter.
Very wet.
That's a bit tough.
Yeah.
A couple of the fruit trees, but other than that, they do pretty well.
So, do you have a greenhouse type of scenario that you can move plants into?
No, not anymore.
Oh.
I used to. Yeah, and they used to go in the garage, or actually sort of turned the balcony space into an unheated greenhouse.
Okay.
So that's where I kind of do some of the plant starts. And any kind of plants that needs a little babying.
Yeah, I know we have some listeners who live in places that get actual winter, which is not something we get here in Southern California. And they have to bring their plants in, or they have a greenhouse. I know I have one friend who has a geodesic dome, and so she's growing tropical things. She's got her citrus trees in there and subtropical plants in there. Do you have recommendations for people who need to move their plants indoors or into a greenhouse setting for the winter?
If you live somewhere in the cold, you mean like certain plants, or?
Yeah, are they susceptible to anything in particular in indoor settings as opposed to outdoors?
I see. Sometimes I think poor circulation would cause a lot of bug issues. So you have to be careful with that.
Bugs in the center.
Bugs, yeah. And sometimes it seems to attract like white flies or just settling things on the top of the soil. And we tend to think the top of the soil looks dry, and we think the whole thing is dry, and you oversaturate the bottom, but the top is so dry that end up killing the plant or wilting. And so just be careful with like the soil. Just always check it with your finger. Exactly.
Yep. That's important. That rule of thumb, I mean, it's always been like, the best way to tell, because everyone asks, like, how do I know whether to water my plants or not? Stick your finger all the way in it.
Yeah.
If soil is wet and clinging to the fingertip, you don't need to water. If it's not, if it's dry and dusty, you need to water. Yeah. So that's a good guideline. All right. What are some, because you have an online store.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite or your shopper's favorite edible crops that might be out of the ordinary? I mean, they might.
Yeah.
I bet these are all very common to you now because you've had them in your life for so long. But like for the average Joe who's never grown a tropical or a subtropical plant or like an edible crop that's from an Asian, culture, what are the ones that you like the most?
Well, I did mention the longevity spinach. That is a popular one because a lot of people have been checking out research and saying how it helps with like their health. And then the other one, the one I'm really excited about is called grass jelly.
Grass
It's
jelly.
yes, it grows as a vine.
Tell me more.
And yeah, so it literally has like it's loaded with pectin, these leaves. So you grow my yeah, so that is my filler plant, what I mentioned earlier as the backdrop. I just let it go on and on. The plant once it establishes, it would just it's vigorous. You can prune it back, but it just grows. It's crazy. I love it. You just harvest the leaves, blend it with a little water, and I do have a tutorial if anyone's interested on my YouTube. Yeah, and I show how you extract the juice of it, and it just binds to itself. Like there's no pectin. When I was eating that yesterday, and people were like, "And what do you use? Like what agent? You know, to bind?" I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like it's just the leaves.
It is.
Yeah.
And so what I'm imagining is something that ends up being a little bit mucilaginous or kind of like how flax and
Yeah.
chia get that way. Does it do that at all or no?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not slimy.
It's not slimy. Thank you. That's the word I was trying to avoid, but yeah.
Okra or slippery.
Right. Yeah. I know a lot of people find that texture difficult.
It's a little different from Western food. Yeah.
But the jelly
yeah.
is
It's
white
like jello,
jello.
but
All
I
right.
guess it's plant based, so it's jelly.
Interesting. Okay, like a seaweed or something.
Yeah.
And so people are interested in buying that from you?
Yeah, because everyone, it's just so fun that you're able to do that and to get your kids involved, you know?
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so traditionally in Vietnam or Thailand, they tend to use this for sweets, add like with syrup water. But if you want to make it more healthy, you can use honey or lemonade or make your juice and then throw that in. I like freezing pomegranates, throw that in, and then I put like a little bit of drizzle with honey and maybe basil seeds and coconut cream on top.
Oh, wow. That sounds
Dragon
really
fruit, like
decadent.
yeah, or jackfruits and really tropical and it's delicious and it's just pretty and fun to look at. You
Nice.
can also have it savory. In China, they do that for as a salad that like goes into the salad.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned dragon fruit, and I want to ask you about that because I have a dragon fruit. It's really like 4 cuttings that I started, and most of them have grown up on a trellis that's in a container though, and so the
Yeah.
roots are doing this circular thing, and I've gotten one dragon fruit on it last year, and I have one ripening right now.
Wow.
What do you recommend for? Because it took 3 years for that to happen.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for more productivity, especially in containers?
Yeah, I have a dragon fruit in container as well. I used to have a bigger space, and they were just growing in the ground. Actually, I had this on the same place growing in the ground at one point, and they were just so productive.
Yeah, and the ground is better,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. So now in the taller, now it's I have to grow it up, and
Yeah.
my trellis is I think maybe 7 feet.
Yeah, I've got an 8-foot trellis, and it's reached the top of that.
Very
And
cool.
it started to climb into the roof of my next door neighbor, so I have to cut it down at the top.
Oh,
But they will arch down if you let them.
exactly. And I do let mine arch down, but that's a reason for me to grow it taller because when it arches down, my walkway is about 1.5 feet. So it's just going to be in your
Yeah.
face with these thorns.
You can't do
Yeah,
that.
so I have to make it taller. And I'm thinking the reason why you get fewer flowers or fruits, maybe because higher up, maybe it takes longer for the energy and of nutrients to get up there. I mean,
Maybe.
just a theory.
Yeah.
And definitely they do like more sun and maybe part shade is okay too. In different varieties, the white ones would be the most productive. I've noticed.
Really? 'Cause
Yeah.
This one is that fuchsia pink on the inside.
Oh yeah, those are good and pretty,
So
but
beautiful.
I think they're a little less productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll keep going. I'm not giving up on it.
No, they're too pretty.
At one time, you had this cute little thing on your website. It looks like a ball of moss, for lack of a better way of describing it. And you had it for sale. It's sold out now, but
Yeah.
it's called the Marimo.
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 Yeah.
What is it, and why should people have one?
So that's actually the very beginning of how Wendiland started.
Really?
Yeah, I used to do home decor because I was really into fragrant plants like flowers and succulents and cacti. I was making terrariums, and then I had this water feature because I had this little marimo forever, like as like a pet.
Because you use that
Yeah,
language, you talk about it like it's
that was like my first silly
like a
little
chia
YouTube
pet,
video.
right?
Yeah, you can name it. Because in Japan, it's like because this thing can live for like, I think the oldest they found is like 150 years. So you just give it like your grandpa would give it to the kids. Yeah.
God.
So I was like, this is really cool. I got to share the story, and let's post it. Like, I was like, I started on Etsy, I was like, let's try this out. I mean, this is so cute and like easy to take care. They don't need super high light setting. I mean, they will benefit from that, will grow faster, just like most plants.
Yeah.
But like office pet is really cool. People were getting for their offices, and instead of fish, it's easier to take care of.
And so, how do you take care of it? Because I mean, I imagine you have to talk to it and pet it.
I believe that helps, but it's not a requirement. Just a name. That's all I want. And some filtered water.
And some water. Okay.
Yeah. And filtered water, and just change out the water, once a week or so. Just preferably before the water gets cloudy. But that's definitely a big sign that says, if you see dirty water. Sometimes you clean it, and it feels kind of like a sponge, it's like very squishy.
Okay.
So you just kind of lightly
You sort of squeeze it out.
Squeeze it in the water, just like water exchange to clear it out. Do that a couple of times. Maybe every time you change out the water, you want to do that. And it's really just a type of a type of algae that just multiplies and but very, very slow growing.
And it's alive.
It's alive. It's living. It gets bigger and bigger. I think the biggest one was about this
About
size.
like what, 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches across?
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay.
Bigger. Yeah, under 4 inches.
I think a lot of listeners are going to end up going out and finding these because that sounds like such a fun idea.
Yeah, they are, and they're just like super slow growing, and sometimes a bit difficult. I think I might have been the cause of why the industry got so saturated. Yeah, but then the quality went down.
Okay.
Because people are really trying to pump out these like production, like mass production.
Oh, but if they're slow growing, that's not
I don't.
conducive to the industry, is it? I don't know.
Yeah, but they wanted to, I think, for meeting the demand, and they ended up falling apart very easily.
Oh.
So it was the quality went down. So
Okay, so it's a challenge.
it's a little challenge to find
Some of
now.
you want to accept. So you're at the expo. We're recording this in September at the Heirloom Expo, even though you're hearing this at the end of November, right after Thanksgiving. You did a talk at the expo on growing in small spaces. What are some of the tricks that you utilize to do so?
Growing upwards is a big thing. And if you want to look into growing more food, definitely fill in any space. And instead of mulching with dry materials, use, like I call it living mulch. And it's just like the filler plants, plants that cascade, plants that like lower light settings or par sun, dapple sunlight, kind of filler plants that are edible.
Give me an example. Like you already said, the spinach. Getting the longevity spinach filler. What else do you like to use?
There is one called as a Japanese mugwort called yumochi, and it tastes more like a leafy green rather than the herb, like the very strong scented, mugwort. It's a Japanese. Yeah, it's a Japanese mugwort, and it's a spreader, but it's not invasive. Anywhere you don't want it, you just pull it out very easily, and it grows this beautiful, delicate leaves that are like deep green with like this red vein, like this purpley red vein.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, and it does well in pretty low light, bright full light, or where you put like hostas. You can put them there; they're really happy.
Okay.
You can put them in part sun, maybe just away from afternoon sun. Just a little more sun, a little more water. That's pretty much the requirement, but definitely they can handle like just a couple hours of late afternoon or just early morning, a couple hours of sun. They're really happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on Instagram, I'm changing the subject here because this is for completely selfish reasons. You have an older post about growing loofah. I've grown it, but it wasn't easy for me. I did grow it in a vertical fashion where I planted it in the top of a green stalk. Tower planter, and it just draped down, and it got really long, and I kept just kind of lifting it back up over the top. but it wasn't super productive. Do you have any pointers for growing it in small spaces?
Yeah, so I grow it vertically also with
Mhm.
that one, and I have it up. It grows up to the trellis, and it's just like a straight trellis where it hangs down.
Ah,
Yeah, and they tend to have. I don't know if you noticed like ants on it.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's just they seem to produce the plant just the flowers, those nectar, and it seems like the plants just kind of oozes out these nectar like things. So I used to pick the ants off the plants, but I noticed they actually help to pollinate.
They're
too.
pollinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like just leave them alone. So are the dragon fruit. Sometimes they attract it. The ants on there.
They
Yeah.
are.
And the loofahs really love a lot of sun, and they definitely like a lot of water.
A lot of
At
water.
the loofah.
That I think was my problem. I was hand
Yeah.
watering that container, and it's in the back of the yard where I'd sort of forget
Yeah,
about
we
it.
call it water squash in Chinese.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
Okay.
big tip for that. And did you know they're edible?
Yes, so
Yeah.
they are. And talk a little bit about that. How do you prepare them? Because you
Mhm.
harvest them to eat when they're young, not when
Right.
once they've matured.
Yeah. So I love how versatile that plant is.
How do you like to prepare it?
I prepare it. My favorite way is just a quick stir fry, just a little bit of garlic and just you chop it up in big chunks so it stays that nice like shape and that texture. And then yeah, stir fry it for a couple of minutes, and then put the lid on to do a little steaming. And there's no water needed.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
it just comes out that way.
Makes its own.
Yeah, it's like the best, sweetest tasting broth ever.
Oh,
I
wow.
just put that over rice. Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. And then the next one, if you guys are into raw, you can juice it. They taste pretty sweet, especially the variety that I grow. I don't know the name, but it's like been in the family for a while now.
Okay.
It grows up to like a 1.5 feet to 2 feet, and the longest has been like 3 feet.
Oh, wow.
And that size, but it's still tender.
Interesting.
Yeah. And one time I was like just playing around with like just you can either juice it, I think I mentioned that. And then the second way is slice it the long way and make like a a baguette,
Oh.
and stuff whatever you want.
Oh,
in it.
so it's the bread.
It's my bread.
Nice.
It's just so fun.
What a great idea.
Yeah. And it's kind of sweet and little like cotton like texture. It's like very fluffy.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, but try that with your mini ones or the regular ones are about 6 inches, maybe 6 to 8 inches.
That sounds great. Do you scoop out the seeds at all or anything?
No, at the before they get hard. So they're still very squishy. They're very tender and edible. The seeds are still very soft. If not, there's probably no seeds when they're that small.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, I know one of the fun parts of harvesting mature loofah is shaking the seeds out, like having to get, because they get all stuck in there and
Yeah.
stuff. But if they're dry enough, they all just kind of fall out when you cut the
Yeah.
end off. All right. Thank you for indulging me that question. It is tip time. Do you have a favorite tip that you'd like to share with the Garden Nerd audience?
My favorite tip, I think, since we already talked about vertical growing.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is about at least the bare minimum to keep your plants healthy and the soil life is to use filtered water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like I have a filter just on the spigot so that whatever comes out of drip system or hand watering, everything goes with the filter. Even if washing other things that goes on the floor that runs into the raised beds.
Is it a hose end filter?
It's a hose. It's
like an inline.
It's inline and it's attached to I have filters for separate places. Yeah, but the first one goes through the spigot.
Okay.
And then it splits off. Then I have a filter for the irrigation, the beginning of it, and inline.
Do you have does the brand name come to the top of your
mind?
Yeah,
I just used the Boogie Brew one.
Boogie
right
Brew?
out there. Yeah,
I use the Boogie Brew.
Easy one.
Yeah, it is because it screws onto the end of the
That's
hose
all.
nozzle.
You can put a hose on. You can put that thing on.
Exactly. I use that for brewing compost tea.
Yeah.
And it removes chlorine and chloramine.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
And it lasts, what, like 35,000 gallons or 45,000 gallons?
Something insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the end, if I switch that one off, I just move that filter, like used filter in the front for the cars or whatever you need.
Yeah.
And in the garden gets like a new filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not too expensive. It's
very affordable.
Yeah.
For the amount of I think I use it every 6 months. I switch it out or something.
Okay.
It depends how much you use, but yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Filtered water for your plants, just
Yeah.
like us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wendi, for taking the time to talk to me and for being a guest on the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It
course.
was so much fun chatting.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at my website, Wendiland.com. I'm also on social media and YouTube. Yeah, you can just look up the name Wendiland. I should pop right up.
Excellent. All right, garden nerds, you'll find a link to Wendi's website and online store this week at Gardenerd.com. We'll also link to her social media feeds and her YouTube channel so you can watch her latest videos on growing food. That's it for this week. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. Visit us for tons of free gardening information at Gardenerd.com. Consider becoming a Patreon subscriber to support all the free stuff we do here at Garden Nerd. You'll find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter under Gardenerd1, on Facebook as Gardenerd.com, and of course, our Garden Nerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening!